It's the Underpowered Hour on this week's show. Range Rover's back at Wimbledon, Jaguar's starting an art show, and then we talk all about getting the very best brakes set up in your vintage Land Rover. And now, here's the show. Welcome to the Underpowered Hour. I'm Steve Beres, mild-mannered television executive by day and Land Rover collector by night. You can find out more about our cars and what we're working on at theberescollection.com or follow us on Instagram at theberescollection. I'm joined, as always, by my good friend, Goss.
Thank you to everyone joining us today. I'm the flat panel to Steven's falling roofline. I'm the surprising interior volume of podcasting. I own and operate Pangolin 4x4 in Springfield, Oregon, where we live and breathe Land Rovers. Check us out online on Facebook, Instagram at Pangolin 4x4. Let's get started.
All right, Ike. Well, this week in the Land Rover news, it's busy news week. We got all kinds of stuff going on. First up, of course, is Range Rover's partnership with Wimbledon. Wimbledon, the big tennis match that is currently underway. I heard that...
Are they doing that now?
They're doing it right now. I guess Coco Gauff, she is out, unfortunately.
She's out.
If you're a big...
She's a very popular tennis player?
Yeah, she does play tennis, yes. And she is super popular. You're right on both counts, yeah. Unfortunately, she doesn't, I guess, transitioning from the clay court that she played in France a couple weeks ago to the grass court at Wimbledon is very difficult for her, and she has
I don't understand why they play on grass. Can you explain that to me?
I don't even know.
Doesn't the grass absorb the impact of the ball?
Right? I mean, that's the I don't even know how it bounces. Have you tried to bounce a tennis ball on grass?
Isn't that the whole point of tennis, is for it to bounce on the ground?
I thought so. I thought actually they were all made of essentially concrete, but
I have a fundamental misunderstanding of tennis, I'm sure.
Tennis and the surfaces on which it's played, I think.
Yeah. Dirt. It's dirt. They try to make it all fancy, but it's dirt.
It's dirt, I think. And then there's also dirt with grass in it.
Dirt with grass.
Yeah, and she doesn't like.
There's got to be a dirtologist that's like the tennis science of mud.
Funny you say that, because one of Range Rover's advertising situations this year is to introduce you to all of the people that work in the trades around the tennis championship, one of which is the grass guy.
The grass guy?
Yeah, and he's not the guy you buy weed from. He
cultivates the grass.
He does, and manicures it, and does things
Combs
with it.
And washes it, and shampoos it.
And reads stories to it at night. All the things. Yeah. He does all of that. And I
bet he probably knows a lot about grass. It's got to be a special genetically engineered type of grass.
Wimbledon fancy grass.
Wimbledon fancy grass.
Well, and Wimbledon is also known for their strawberries.
Is it?
It is. They have...
You went to this last year, didn't you?
I went last year, yeah, I guess so.
How silly was it? Was it silly?
It was super silly. Yeah, it was super silly. I wore a T-shirt under my sport coat.
Okay.
Heavily frowned upon.
Heavily frowned upon. Did they throw you out on your ear?
They thought about it several times, I think.
They ran you out of town on a rail, huh?
It's true.
For a T-shirt.
I also showed up in a classic Defender, which also frowned upon. Not the vehicle to show up in. No, there was.
I'll be damned.
Yeah, they parked me in the same place.
The furthest part away.
I think right next to the grass guy, actually.
Right next to the grass guy.
It was like a new
shed.
Now,
here's a question. Would you say there's a significant overlap between the Kentucky Derby crowd and the Wimbledon crowd? Is that a...
Yeah, if there was a Venn
diagram,
diagram,
them dressing the same.
It would be a circle. That's they are exactly the same. Now, because these
sport
folks
coat,
are
straw hat,
all British,
stripy tie,
they're even hoitier than the Kentucky Derby crowd. Yeah, it's fantastic. Really is. You would hate it. But they cultivate and they eat strawberries. They're Wimbledon strawberries. They're from the Wimbledon strawberry farm. And
you know what grows really good in England?
Yeah, strawberries. Yeah, it's
berries.
Tropical fruits.
Berries of all kinds.
Yeah, that's great, yeah. And they have their fancy coats. They have their fancy dresses and hats. Lots of hats. Yeah. It's a lot of fun. And some special Range Rovers. There's one special Range Rover they've been using in all of the advertising that is Wimbledon green with gold accents.
Gold accents?
Oh, yeah.
What other features do you think it has?
I imagine it. If you open up the load space, it may have a tennis ball launcher back there. I hope you can use it to practice.
Mm-hmm.
Mm-hmm. It
smells like Martina Navratilova inside.
Pre or practice?
Yeah, sure.
Okay.
Post-practice.
You got a couple buttons.
You got a couple options.
Yeah, you got some.
The navigator's voice is John McEnroe.
Oh yeah.
When you make a wrong turn, it curses at you.
It just yells at you like you made the wrong call. It's the wrong call. It's a left. It was obviously a left. I love it. I think that it's got that high chair that the person sits on that pops out of the sunroof. So you can have a guy up there in the sweaters, and you're required to wear those weird white sweaters when you're driving it.
That would be amazing.
That's the seatbelt. It's like a sweater that you put on. That's built right into the seat. So you're always wearing a tennis sweater.
Well, it's quite the spectacle. And so Land Rover is the vehicle partner of this tennis match?
Range Rover is the vehicle partner. So they've got lots of white Range Rovers with the Wimbledon logo on the door that drive dignitaries and notaries and people around. And then they're also, I think they sponsor a trophy or something. And then, of course, they have the Range Rover Salon where you can go and eat strawberries and drink champagne with Pierce Brosnan.
Does the special edition Range Rover have like one of those kids that runs out and gets the ball in the trunk?
It does.
And then if you like drop something on the ground, the trunk opens and it runs out and picks it up. Yeah.
I think that'd
be
great.
Amazing.
Mm-hmm.
That'd be amazing.
Comes the ball boy.
What other? Now I hear this is not the only special Range Rover that has been spotted recently.
No, it's true. Land Rover has announced a special edition SV Sport. Which, as you know, has the 6D suspension system from the Octa and all that sort of stuff. So very, very high end. The Black Edition, which is as murdered out as one can have a Range Rover.
Would you call it stealth?
It's the B2 bomber of Range Rovers.
Do you think this is like a weird coincidence that there's been all these stealth bombings and then they release a stealth Range Rover?
That's a good point. Yeah, this is the official Range Rover of bombing Iran. Too soon.
Too soon.
It's got every single surface inside of the car is black. You sit in it and it's like a deprivation chamber. You can't find any of the control. You don't know where the turn signal is. It's just totally black. It is coincidentally the blackest Range Rover that Land Rover has ever made.
Is that what they say?
Yeah, obviously
nobody.
It's
the blackest Range Rover.
They never ran that by anybody before saying
I feel like they should ask somebody before saying that.
The body is painted in something called gloss black exterior, and it has not only black paint but also gloss Narovic black exterior, accoutrement. So all your little bits and bobs out there.
It says here that these have special headlights. When you turn them on, it makes everything dimmer.
Yes, that's right. Completely dim. Invisible, in fact, especially to pedestrians. That is one of their claims to fame in this particular model. But if you are into really, really black Range Rovers, this is it. Even has a little SV black insignia on the door sill that is special to this car. And
but you can't read it because it's the same.
It's all black.
Same color as the background.
You can't. And it has an option where, like on a military vehicle, you can turn off the taillights and headlights and just go full infrared.
Just full dark.
Yeah, full dark. It's interesting. I mean, I had thought they had already produced the world's blackest Range Rover, but apparently no. They're still striving for a deeper black, an even more
using the light absorbing paint.
Oh yeah, the world's blackest paint.
Yeah.
And it'd just be completely invisible.
A silhouette. You can't find the door handle. You just clawing at it.
I'm not sure where anything is.
And
it's extremely, extremely black. Well, coincidentally, if you wanted some apparel maybe to go with your new Range Rover Black, the fine folks at Shackleton, which is a clothing brand, I guess, I wasn't aware of that, have become the official partner of the Defender Rally, not the Defender Rally series, because that's been a thing for a long time, but the Defender that is going to do rallies going forward, the Octa that they have specially prepared for the purpose of rallies. Yeah.
Has its own special puffy vest.
It is the official puffy vest of rallying in a Defender, I guess. And they make all kinds of different things that, are clothing for you to get lost on an expedition in Antarctica. So
if you're chest and back are cold, but your extremities are not.
That's right.
Check out their new puffy vests.
Get into the puffy vest. They also have some like expedition level, and I'm using heavy air quotes around that, clothing. They have one jacket and one pair of pants to sort of harken back to the Shackleton expedition where
they're
everyone
made of sealskin.
Yes, real Saskatchewan sealskin. They all froze to death, remember. So I don't know.
Did they?
They did. Yeah, the Shackleton expedition. Yeah, they all went crazy and froze to death.
Seems weird that you would name your clothing after.
I agree. Yes, I think it is interesting.
Shackleton, they all froze, or they all got away?
There's a number of them froze. Maybe not all of them froze to death, but a significant number of them froze to death. Yeah.
I gotta look this up.
Froze to death.
We gotta do a fact check.
Isn't Shackleton's like great grandson like still around and doing stuff?
If they all froze to death, how would he have a grandson?
Well, he had him before he went.
Okay.
Yeah. Well, he didn't have him either because he's a grandson, but it was, you know how that works. So when two people love each other very much. So there you go. Hop on over to the Shackleton website. And in fact, if you're so inclined, there is now a special Shackleton.com page dedicated to the Shackleton Defender Rally.
Okay. Fact check is in.
Okay. What is it?
All 28 members of Ernest Shackleton's endurance expedition crew survived. I thought that was why it was. I thought that's why it was so famous.
I agree.
Because it was like
a bunch of people died.
A triumph. I think it would be really bad to name your clothing company after an expedition that failed and everyone froze to death.
Okay, well, so then it makes more sense then now. But
yeah.
But you can have a bright orange Shackleton outfit if you would like to go skiing or whatever in it, or you can have a puffy vest. A variety actually of puffy clothing, not just vests. They have puffy jackets. They have no puffy shorts. I think
puffy shorts.
Yeah, like what
I feel
if
like that would
like your lower legs are nice and warm, but like your like crotch area is cold. Puffy shorts.
It's the corollary to the vest.
Exactly. If you're gonna have puffy vest, you need puffy shorts, right?
I somehow I agree with you. I feel like that would be a horribly unpopular piece of clothing, but I agree with you.
Yeah.
So, what else is happening in the world of Jaguar Land Rover that's transcendent in terms of design?
Transcendent is exactly the word for it because, as Jaguar only sold 49 cars this first quarter.
What?
Apparently.
Is that true?
Apparently, in the UK.
49 cars? Did you buy them all?
They registered 49 cars. Okay. I did. Yeah, one of each. They, of course, haven't made cars for a year. So I feel like even
these
then,
are just older models.
Registering 49 cars when you haven't made any cars for a year, that's not bad.
Is it worth it to even have a dealership if you only sell 49 cars?
I don't even know what Jaguar, they've all got to be just selling Range Rovers, right?
I feel like the car lot down the street from me sells more than 49 cars.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Absolutely. But in their endeavor to, become relevant again, Jaguar has launched the Jaguar Art Awards, and their shortlist has just been announced. So,
Do you think this is just really like a hiring scam?
It is
trying to hire designers,
trying to find somebody who can design the next Jaguar. But if you want, sort of woobly looking glass, or you want what looks like a bunch of freezy pops in a stand, or some different blue palm tree art, or my personal favorite, a big long blue rectangle with a guy sitting on it.
It's a sofa? What is it?
I'm not sure entirely, but it's something for sure. So,
Is the guy sitting on it part of the piece, or is it?
No, the answer to that, he's a black silhouette, and so it's sort of a bit of a mystery because it's, you've got a big blue rectangle that certainly looks like a couch, and perhaps the gentleman just sat down on it thinking it was a piece of furniture, but in fact, it is art. So,
I like this one that looks like wrapping paper, like a wrapping paper stand.
There's a few good ones. I like the glass woobly bits. Those are sort of fun. There's some tapestries. It's everything. And as I know is everyone wondering, Dr. Monsignor, Chief Creative Officer, Professor Jerry McGovern, alongside RCA Illumin from the Jaguar creative team. So I guess RCA is his name? I suppose, and artists from the creative fields, including furniture designs and.
I think that's
multimedia
RCA alumni, by the way.
Oh, alumni. That's right. RCA. So what is that? What is RCA? What is RCA?
I don't know,
Anyways,
but
an in-depth evaluation of the submitted works was undertaken by a diverse jury with significant experience.
Royal College of Art
Across. I see.
RCA.
Okay.
I feel like we need a fact checker back at the home office in
That's right.
Sioux City, Iowa here.
But the jury did include JLR's Chief Creative Officer, Professor Jerry McGovern. Is OBE. Is Chief Creative Officer, Professor Jerry McGovern, OBE, is he a professor at the Royal College of Art?
Could be.
Do we know that?
I don't know.
Do we know
I
that?
don't know if that's the case or not. But
why this is, and if so, are we worried about art in the UK going forward? If you're learning from Jerry McGovern, is that a concern for anyone else?
I don't know. Apparently, this is their fearless responses to the brief "copy nothing." So
I see.
They're trying to recognize these artists with the awards because these are groundbreaking artists that are doing art that copies nothing, apparently.
That's right. Professor Jerry McGovern, OBE, is quoted as saying, the Jaguar Art Awards are about celebrating bold, fearless, artistic vision. So, there you go. Work that challenges convention and dares to stand apart.
I'm excited to see how this translates into a new Jaguar.
That's right. Well, he says, as part of the jury, that he has been inspired by the breadth of talent in the submission.
It's true.
There you go.
It's true. I believe it. So there's some good-looking art pieces there. Check it out. Jaguar Art Awards.
Vibrant, distinctive, and unapologetic, just like Jerry McGovern himself. Mostly the unapologetic part. But
I feel like there's definitely some fear in the Jaguar design department.
100%. I think it is
100%
fueled
fearless.
by
I
fear.
think there's a little fear there.
Fueled by fear. Speaking of fueled by fear, I don't know if you've tried to bleed a set of brakes lately, but, when it comes to your ultra vintage Land Rovers, there is, it can be a little tricky. It can be a little intimidating for people. There are
some pitfalls for sure.
There are some pitfalls. And everyone seems to have a theory on the case on exactly the right way to bleed your series or later Land Rover brake systems, especially as you get into the much older cars. Man, there's
the sprinkling of salt in the shape of a pentagram.
Yep.
The summoning of demons.
Very important.
There's a lot going on in the Land Rover drum brake department.
Oh my God!
And
in the forum space, you can find just about any recommendation you would like on how best to bleed your vintage Land Rover brakes. And what I hear you up there at the old Pangolin 4x4 have been testing a new brake bleeding tool. How's testing going?
We're always looking for better ways to do things, and this has not been one of them. But I think generally speaking, we're kind of on the simple part of the brake bleeding spectrum.
Sure.
And there are a number of things to consider when you're doing your drum brakes. And it's not always as simple as just buying all new parts and putting them on the car.
In fact, sometimes that will lead to ruin. In the case of my 80-inch that had the wrong size rear cylinders for...
That was a problem.
When I got it.
That was a problem.
Yeah, when I got it, somebody had put the wrong cylinders in it, and it was a heck of a thing to try to bleed because it would never bleed. It would never work. There was not enough volume
never work.
in the master cylinder,
So, the short wheelbase brakes are different than the long wheelbase brakes. And the short wheelbase brakes remained largely unchanged from almost their inception.
Yep.
There's a few really early hydrostatic brakes that are different, but from, 1949 through about 1980, the brakes are essentially the same. They have the same front wheel cylinders, the same rear wheel cylinders in terms of their swept volume, and the same basic master cylinder. Now, they did add a dual circuit and a power brake in the late 60s.
That's right, yeah.
And early 70s with the late 2A. But essentially, the 9-inch braking system, almost identical start to finish. Mm-hmm. But some of the things before you even get to the brake bleeding that you have to be aware of, you want to make sure that you've got drums that are round, which sounds easy. That you're like, I bought them. They're round.
They're round. They're brand new.
But oftentimes the aftermarket drums they're not round.
They're not round.
They're not round. Yeah. And if you've ever tried to stop a bent bicycle wheel with the brakes. You know what I'm talking about. It is important.
Yeah, it is.
Because the brakes come in and out of contact with the shoe the drum isn't round.
That's right.
Or if your bicycle wheel isn't round.
That's right.
So if you buy an aftermarket drum, maybe make sure it's round. Take it to a machine shop, have them skim it or surface it, make sure it's round. The other thing that's important is making sure that the shoe and the drum are concentric to one another that the contact area on the shoe or pad is 100%,
And how often do you find that a new set of brake pads with the metal backing and everything, like the whole piece, is not concentric with a
almost
brake?
always.
Almost always, yeah.
Yeah, almost always. And it used to be that your brake shop would arc the shoe to the drum.
Right.
They have a little machine and it shaves off a little bit of area so that the shoe contacts the drum, so that the maximum amount of surface area is available to stop the car. Right. And so oftentimes we get cars in our shop, we take the drum off, and you can see where the shoe has been contacting the drum, and it is at the top or the bottom or the top and the bottom, but not
a little bit on the sides. Yeah.
It's a surprisingly small amount.
Yeah.
Surprisingly small amount.
Yeah.
So on the cars that we do, we have the shoes arced to the drum, and usually it's a pretty inexpensive process. The problem is that nobody knows where to do this or knows to do this.
Right. Yeah.
And so they're like, oh, I bought all these parts.
Just going to put them together. It's going to be great.
I bought them from the Rover, parts distributor. They're going to show up. I'm going to put them on. Everything's going to be great.
Yeah.
And they can get good if they wear in, but that takes a long time, and they're not good right off the bat.
Right.
And people are like, why aren't my brakes working correctly?
Yeah, and especially if you have an occasional use vehicle, they may just never wear in because you're just not using them enough. And
The other important thing to consider is the springs. The springs go onto the shoes in a particular way. Yep. They retract the wheel cylinder. They pull the shoes away from the drum. And those are important. It's important to put those in the correct position. Also, it puts the shoe in tension against the adjuster. And the position of the springs is important, and you should refer to a picture in the workshop manual, ideally, as to where those springs go.
Yep.
And I do not rely on how they came off the car, because
100%.
so many times the previous owner has put the springs on incorrectly.
That's right. Yeah.
And the anchor plate that connects the shoe to the bottom pivot, that is another piece that's often installed incorrectly. And the adjuster is a really critical part. It positions the shoe as close to the drum without touching it as possible. And those adjusters get worn out. The little serrated teeth get bad. If you cannot lock the shoe against the drum, no amount of bleeding will make the shoe perform correctly. Yeah. And then finally, the anchor at the bottom. The anchor at the bottom, it's the little pivot, the pin. It's usually pressed into the backing plate. Yeah. But sometimes it gets loose and it wants to walk around. And because it's loose, the position of the shoes is not consistent, And so because it's not consistent, that means the shoes are not concentric with the drum. And you're back to square one, where you can't bleed it, you can't adjust it. It's not going to ever perform correctly. So those are several things that you need to have a checklist and make sure all that stuff is up to par, because bleeding it won't fix those issues with your brakes. And your pedal will always feel spongy, and it will also sometimes feel inconsistent. Like if your adjuster is moving around, it's loose in the backing plate, then every time you apply the brakes, the shoe's in a different position. Yeah. And so it'll never feel like, sometimes it'll feel good, and then another time you press the brakes and there's nothing there. Yeah. So check all that stuff.
Head over the cliff into the ravine.
Yeah, and the bleeding, and that's for short wheelbase cars. The long wheelbase cars have their own sets of, peculiarities. The 11-inch brakes were used on Series 1s from about 1955, and they stay relatively the same through the 80s. They're basically the same.
Yeah.
And in the 80s, they made all the brakes 11 inches. So short wheelbase, long wheelbase, they just kind of made them all the same. So the front wheels on the 109, the 11-inch brakes, the front wheels have 2 cylinders, one at the top and one at the bottom. And Land Rover, in their infinite wisdom, put the bleeder on the bottom cylinder.
Yeah.
And so if you know anything about air in liquid, usually the air is at the top.
That's right. That's how gravity works.
So these wheel cylinders, they can have a tendency to trap air in the cylinders. So similar to the 88s, before you get started bleeding, you want to make sure that everything's set up correctly. On the front, they have a twin leading shoe design. Pretty straightforward. You can't get the shoes mixed up because they're all pretty much the same. Twin leading shoes, the front shoe is leading, the back shoe is leading. So the shoes themselves are the same. The position of the springs is important. And the condition of the adjusters and those sorts of things still important. You need to make sure that your shoes in the back or your shoes are in the correct locations. Now, the back of the car, that's where it starts to get tricky. It seems like it's simple because it's only one cylinder, but these have a leading and trailing shoe. And Land Rover made the shoes look almost identical. And they're not stamped or marked.
No, of course not.
And so when you look at the shoes, a cursory inspection, you're like, these shoes are all the same, and people put them on, and they get 2 leading shoes on one side, 2 trailing shoes on another side. They get them all mixed up. You got to be careful. And the difference is the position of the adjusting peg. So the peg that sits or rides on the adjuster on the rear wheel, the position of that is slightly different from the leading shoe to the trailing shoe. So be very careful. There's some information online about this. There's a technical bulletin in the Land Rover technical bulletin thing, but there's not information about this in the workshop manual, unfortunately. But it is important to how the brakes work.
Makes sense that it would be in there. That would be a good place
They
for
really made it hard. They really did. Like, they were asking for people to get this mixed up.
Was that in a protectionist sort of thing for Land Rover service centers to...
I can't imagine that that's true. Yeah. But somebody in their infinite wisdom thought, let's make 2 almost identical shoes and make it critical that they're in the correct location and not mark them.
That's right.
And not mention it. In
don't tell anybody about that.
Don't tell anybody about that.
They'll figure it out.
Yeah, the early cars, the Series 1s and Series 2s, they have a semi-floating wheel cylinder.
Yeah.
And that's a really weird thing because on most all brake components, you want them to be securely
just
fastened
kind of like
to
bolted
the car.
to something.
Yeah, but the rear wheel cylinders on those Series 1 and 2 cars, they're not supposed to be fully tightened down. They're supposed to kind of float in there. And obviously people tighten them down and then they don't work properly.
Yeah, it's an interesting choice.
It's kind of silly, but they're, not to get too far into the weeds here, but I guess the critical thing is make sure all your brake hardware is correct. Make sure all the pieces fit together nicely. Make sure it's all good quality parts.
Yeah.
Before you get started bleeding, otherwise your bleeding process is going to be hard. Yeah. And the results that you get from your bleeding process, it's not going to be ideal.
Yeah, you're not going to get anything. And so do you subscribe to the master cylinder out or from the wheel cylinders in? What is your...
I think either can be effective. Yeah. You can do it either way.
Yeah.
And it just depends on what equipment you have. If you have the means to pump fluid through the wheel cylinder and back to the master cylinder, do it.
Yep.
It's not difficult. You basically connect a pressure source, whether that's a pump or there's a bunch of little tools to do it.
Yeah.
And you push fluid back through the wheel cylinder to the master cylinder. And that can absolutely totally work. But a lot of people don't have that equipment or don't know how to rig it up. But there's a ton of YouTube videos on it. There's a bunch of tools ranging from cheap to expensive for what you might want to do there for reverse bleeding. There's also pressure bleeding, and that's where you pressurize the brake reservoir and you push fluid through the system so it has constant pressure on it, and you basically just open the bleed nipples at the wheel cylinders and it pushes fluid out without operating the pedal. That's another way that absolutely can work. But the simplest way and the way we often do it is to just have 2 people, one person building pressure at the master cylinder and one person opening the bleed screws at the wheel cylinders. And so building pressure in the system and then opening the bleed screw. And then as soon as pressure starts to decrease, closing the bleed screw so that there's not an opportunity for air to come back in the system. If there's always pressure on the pedal, then there's never going to be a situation where air can be drawn up into the system.
Yeah.
Some people also subscribe to the method where they just open the bleed screws and let it sit and just dump brake fluid all over the floor of your garage.
Interesting.
It's called gravity bleeding.
Yeah,
you can look that up too.
Well,
and some people find that effective. Now, the one thing that I will mention that we haven't touched on is the master cylinder and its relation to the pedal, right? So there's an adjustment on the push rod at the master cylinder with the earlier single circuit brakes.
Yeah.
Now, that adjustment is important, and that distance from the pedal to the master cylinder push rod, that's a critical piece, because if you don't have any clearance there, it will be blocking the return port for the brake fluid reservoir, and that won't allow any more fluid into the system.
Right.
And then if you get it bled and you go for a drive in a car like this, it will continue to build pressure because there's no way to release the pressure. And basically the brakes will progressively, every time you press them, get firmer and firmer until the car stops and can't drive, right?
Yeah.
Or the brakes drag, or you get these situations that people call, why are my brakes on? They won't come off. It's because there's no free play between the pedal and the brake master cylinder push rod. Right. So make sure that is set up correctly. There's some dimensions for that in the workshop manual, but brakes are really important, so make sure you get them right. I would say 85 to 90% of the cars that we see come in the shop, there is something assembled wrong in the brake system.
Yep. And, the cars get a terrible reputation for having, no brakes or really shitty brakes or whatever.
Really do.
But, in fact, a system that's set up correctly is really good. It
really
fine.
can be. It really can be good, and I promise you, it will lock up all the wheels.
Yes,
if it's set up correctly.
100%. I can Tokyo drift my 80-inch. No problem. No problem at all with that. It's and that was like I said, that was a case where I had a different bore on the rear cylinders and just didn't make any sense. Couldn't figure it out. They look identical. They were brand new. All that sort of stuff. Right?
That's another important thing that you mentioned. Getting the wheel cylinders in the appropriate locations is important. Yep. So on a short wheelbase, the front wheel cylinders are 1.25 inch bore, and the rear cylinders are 1 inch bore. So if you mix them up right to left or front to back, there are 4 individual cylinders, and there's a front right, a front left, a rear right, and a rear left.
Yep.
And the difference between the sides is just that the position where the brake hose comes in is different. So let's say you put a right one on the left side. Then the brake hose comes in at the wrong place. That puts the brake hose in the wrong location, and sometimes that can lead to the brake hose being pinched or rubbed by the tire. We had a car that came in with no brakes, and the tire had rubbed through the brake hose because it was in the wrong position. And so the tire was touching the brake hose, rubbed a hole right in it.
Yeah, in no time. Yeah, and that's a really dangerous condition because
catastrophic.
Those are, of course,
could be really dangerous.
Those are single loop systems. There's no backup. Like if you lose any one of your wheel cylinders, you lose them all. So
it's really important to have this stuff correct. And so then obviously you got to have them correct front to back because you get more
braking
volume.
More on the right side than the left side too. Or in my case, the gentleman that had the car before me had put in all front, so it had a 1/2 inch more volume of fluid than it was supposed to, and the master cylinder just didn't have that volume to give. So would never completely engage.
Never stop. Now, you did mention a thing where, if you mix the cylinders right to left, it wouldn't feel like there was a problem until your tire rubbed a hole in the brake hose. But the other thing that you did touch on is a situation where a car is pulling from one side to the other.
Yeah.
Sometimes that can be as simple as a brake adjustment.
Yeah.
But a lot of times that's indicative of a condition where there's grease in the wheel. So your hub seal is actually a really important component in your braking system.
Right.
So if your hub seals are leaking and you get oil in one side, it's going to pull to that side.
Yeah.
I'm sorry. It's going to pull away from that side.
It can't break that side.
Yeah, can't break on that side. So it's going to pull away from that side.
Yeah.
So, make sure your hub seals aren't leaking into your brake drums because there's not really a good way for that to get out other than what drips out and across the braking surface. And once your shoes are saturated with grease, they're junk.
There's nothing you can do, yeah. And that does cut down on the rusting of your retention springs a little bit. So that's always a nice feature of that, but does unfortunately adversely affect your braking. So
It does.
Yeah, because those springs can also rust and can break and all kinds of stuff. So the moral of the story is, before you complain that you can't bleed your brakes, give that whole braking system a once over. Check it out.
Give it a look.
See
It's,
what it looks like.
it sounds like there's a bunch of stuff to check, but it's pretty straightforward. Make yourself a checklist. Go through the workshop manual.
Yep.
Make sure everything's in good shape, because this will pay for itself the first time you use it. Those brakes.
100%. And it's also something to do every time you get a new Land Rover, a Land Rover that's new to you, is to just go through all this stuff. Don't assume that the person before you has put it together correctly, even if they're, whatever, an expert. It's just good to know that, right? Know your own stuff. It's easy. It's a fun weekend to take the drums off your series Land Rover and just make sure everything's looking good.
Yeah.
You never know. Maybe somebody's hidden some treasure in there. It's possible.
Spiders.
Ooh, spiders. Brake drum spiders are the worst. They're like those trapdoor spiders. They just hide. They wait for you to take your brake drum off and then eat your face. So, yeah, good times. Well, at that, I'm going to go check out my braking system and see if I can't figure out why it's pulling to the middle for some reason. That's going to have to look into that.
That's just what you want.
Yeah. So at that, it's been a slice as always, and we'll talk to you next week.
See you on the trail.
The Underpowered Hour is produced by Liza Beres, Ike Goss, and me, Steve Beres. Pavel Svardov composed and performed our theme music. Consider supporting the show on Patreon, and if you already do, thank you. Your support makes the show possible. For even more, check out our Instagram or Facebook.